This is the one case that truly screamed out for the death penalty. For so long after that homicide, I could close my eyes at night and I could see those children. We're gonna find out who did this.
It was Mother's Day, May 12th, 1985, when the unthinkable occurred in a quiet Fayetteville, North Carolina neighborhood. The bodies of Kathryn Eastburn and her two young daughters, Kara and Erin, were discovered in their home on Summerhill Road, their throats savagely cut. The sole survivor, the family's 20-month-old baby girl Jana, found dehydrated and alone in her crib, crying out for her murdered mother and sisters. For the Eastburn family and their neighbors, it was a day that would haunt them forever. How could such a heinous act of violence befall this seemingly ordinary military family? And who on earth could be capable of slaughtering a mother and her innocent children in cold blood? The investigation into the Eastburn murders quickly zeroed in on Timothy Hennis, a 27-year-old Army sergeant who had recently adopted the family's dog, Dixie. Hennis's physical resemblance to an eyewitness description of the killer was uncanny.
And I looked at that composite and I said, oh my goodness, this is our man right here.
And when police discovered he drove a car matching the one seen fleeing the crime scene, he became their prime suspect. But as the case wound its way through the courts over the next quarter century, the twists and turns would leave everyone, from the grieving Eastburn family to the dogged investigators, to the jury members themselves, questioning whether Hennis was truly the monster they were seeking. Gary and Kathryn Eastburn were the picture of a devoted military couple. They had met in the 1970s and quickly married, with Gary serving as a captain in the U.S. Air Force. The Eastburns eventually welcomed three beautiful daughters into their lives, Kara, Erin, and the baby, Jana. As the dawn of spring 1985 broke, the Eastburns prepared for another major change. Gary had been assigned as a liaison to the Royal Air Force in England and abroad. The whole family would go in only several months. One matter the family had to settle: get Dixie, the English setter, a new home. On May 7th, 1985, Katie placed a classified ad in the local newspaper to find a good family who would want to adopt Dixie before the big move. Little did she know that doing such a simple act would set in motion a chain of events that leads to unimaginable tragedy. An Army sergeant named Timothy Hennis, who was 27 at the time with a wife and a child, answered that ad. All accounts of his interchange with Katie were pleasant. He seemed like a nice, trustworthy man who would give Dixie a loving home. But just 2 days later, on the night of May 9th, something horrific occurred at the Eastburn residence. Authorities believe that sometime between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m., an intruder brutally attacked and murdered Katie, Kara, and Erin. The crime scene was a nightmare. The victims had been repeatedly stabbed, their throats viciously cut. Katie had also been SA'd. Only baby Jana, trapped in her crib, managed to survive the savage onslaught, miraculously clinging to life for nearly 3 days until a concerned neighbor finally reported the family's absence. When the grisly discovery was made on Mother's Day, the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office immediately launched an intensive investigation. Detectives Robert Biddle and Jack Watts combed the Eastburn home, finding physical evidence like fingerprints and hair samples. A luminol test revealed someone had tried, unsuccessfully, to clean up the crime scene. Eyewitness Patrick Cohn came forward, telling the investigators that he had seen a tall, blond man in a black jacket exiting the Eastburn driveway in the early morning hours of May 10th, carrying a garbage bag. Cohn's description was used to create a composite sketch that bore a striking resemblance to Sergeant Timothy Hennis. When local media broke the news of the murders, Hennis himself reportedly contacted police and offered his assistance. They were further amazed at how Hennis seemed to closely match the description as given by Cohn. He was tall, and his car was a white Chevrolet Chevette, the same as one described by the witness. Hinnis, of his own will, submitted to giving blood, hair, and saliva samples, but this cooperation only seemed to satisfy the investigators' growing desire to implicate him in these crimes. They quickly identified the record of Hinnis's use of Katie Eastburn's stolen ATM card in the days following the murders to withdraw several $100s, and a female witness claimed to have seen Hinnis at the ATM machine around that time. All this, with the physical evidence combined with the eyewitness, led to the arrest of Hinnis and charging him with the murder of Katie, Kara, and Erin Eastburn, along with the SA on Katie. During trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture for the jury. Hinnis, with his wife and young daughter away that night, came calling at the Eastburn home, seeking sexual advances from the attractive Katie. When she rebuked him, they said, Hinnis lost his temper and savagely killed the whole family, except for the baby, Jana. Hinnis's defense team, led by marquee lawyers Gerald Beaver and Billy Richardson, would later concede that the evidence against their client seemed overwhelming, but they insisted that none of the physical samples, fingerprints, hair, blood, or saliva matched Hinnis. They also poked holes in the eyewitness accounts, suggesting the descriptions were unreliable. After hours of sad evidence and grisly crime scene photographs, the jury gave its verdict on July 4th, 1986. Timothy Hinnis was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to die. It looked like the Eastburn family had finally been served justice, but the story was far from over. Just days after Hinnis was sent to death row, a strange letter arrived at his prison cell. Dear Mr. Hinnis, it read, I did the crime. I murdered the Eastburns. Sorry you're doing the time. Thanks, Mr. X. Hinnis's lawyers dismissed the letter as a hoax, but they refused to give up the fight to clear their client's name. In a precedent-setting decision, the North Carolina Supreme Court agreed to overturn Hinnis's conviction, ruling that the trial judge had improperly allowed the prosecution to show the jury a parade of gruesome crime scene photos that had unfairly prejudiced them. 4 years after the killings, in 1989, Timothy Hinnis found himself on trial for the 3 murders once again. This time, the defense team would come out swinging, as they introduced a number of new witnesses and evidence, designed to do nothing more than undermine the case put forth by the prosecution team. Most significantly, they brought forth a young man named John Rawpaw, who bore a perfect resemblance to Hinnis and claimed that he was jogging near the Eastburn home at the hour of the murders. The second jury proved far more skeptical of the state's case. After deliberating for 2 days, they acquitted Timothy Hinnis of all charges, setting him free. For Gary Eastburn, the father whose world had been shattered, it was a devastating blow. With Hinnis cleared, the case of the Eastburn murders seemingly went cold. The killer who had so brutally taken the lives of Katie, Kara, and Erin had managed to escape justice, free to live out the next 2 decades as an upstanding soldier and family man. Hinnis resumed his Army career, seeing action in the First Gulf War and earning numerous commendations. He even became a scoutmaster, leading hiking trips with his young son. Meanwhile, Gary Eastburn and his surviving daughter Jana tried to piece their lives back together. Gary remarried and relocated the family to England, where Jana grew up with a new stepmother. But the memory of that horrific Mother's Day would never truly leave them. Just when it seemed the Eastburn case would forever remain an unsolved mystery, a twist of fate intervened in 2005. A cold case detective named Larry Trotter attended a seminar where the Eastburn murders were used as a case study. Intrigued, Trotter dug deeper, eventually learning that semen samples had been collected from Katie Eastburn's body during the original investigation. Since DNA testing was still in its infancy in the 1980s, DNA testing was not available. Trotter sent the samples to the state crime lab for modern analysis. The results were stunning. The DNA was a perfect match to Timothy Hinnis. After more than 2 decades, the man who had once been acquitted was now firmly linked to the SA and murders. Prosecutors were ecstatic, but they faced a major legal hurdle. The Constitution's prohibition on double jeopardy prevented the state from retrying Hennis for the same crimes. However, the military had a potential path forward. Since Hennis had been an active duty soldier at the time of the murders, the Army could potentially court-martial him. In 2006, the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office contacted the commanding officer at Fort Bragg, requesting that Hennis be recalled to active duty to face a military trial. To the shock of Hennis and his family, who had built peaceful lives in Washington state, the Army complied. Hennis was ordered back to Fort Bragg to stand trial once again. As the court-martial proceedings began in 2010, the now 52-year-old Hennis maintained his innocence, just as he had for the previous quarter-century. His defense team, led by military lawyer Frank Spinner, argued that the DNA evidence was unreliable and potentially contaminated, and that there was still no physical proof linking their client to the actual murders. But the prosecution had a new ace up their sleeve. Kathryn Eastburn, the sole survivor of the massacre, was now an adult and determined to testify against Hennis. Hennis's lawyers also made a shocking claim. They suggested that the intercourse between Hennis and Kathryn Eastburn may have been consensual, with the implication that she was partially responsible for the tragedy. The courtroom erupted in outrage at this assertion, with one observer describing it as an unbelievable moment. On April 8, 2010, after 3 weeks of testimony, the military jury convicted Timothy Hennis of all 3 charges of premeditated murder. Hennis has been sentenced to death for the second time in his life.
This is the one case that truly screams out for the death penalty.
The Eastburn family murders were an awful example that reminded people how even the most ideal lives could be radically changed in an instant by atrocity. Our hearts go out to Katie, Kara, and Erin, and their loved ones. May they find peace and solace in the memories they left behind.